So let's get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of what's coming up in just a couple months. I guess we can say we're in the season of it, the midterms. Here's my question. So, a couple months ago, God, it's a midterm. It's going to be a referendum on the incumbent, and Biden, for whatever reason, isn't very popular, and all these, and really looking ahead to what happens if they if the Republicans take over. My question is, have we gone too far in the other direction? Because definitely the sort of thrust of the articles out there now, here, I'll just quote the one from The Hill. The big red wave has crested and turned into a rising blue tide. There you go. Is there really a rising blue tide, or, is that sort of just a journalistic conceit?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, the data is pretty startling. So I don't think people are fooled. I myself was always, I will say, one of the few things I've gotten right here in recent years. I was very skeptical about the determinism of the red wave. I mean, history would suggest it, and the fact that polarization is intensified, and therefore demography is destiny, and red states revert at the end. All that was people who've been betting on the kind of red wave scenario have been right the last 2 or 3 elections, and people like me were saying, well, wait, there's a good candidate here in North Dakota, a Democrat. And it was like, forget it. North Dakota's Republican. It doesn't matter if Heidi Heitkamp is a wonderful person. And so that the demography is destiny and history is destiny. People were right. And so, and increasingly right over the last 20 years. That's what polarization means when you think about it for a minute, right? But it also is true that these waves, if I can use that term, these trends crest, A, and B. And we do have 2 things in this. The one thing I saw, I guess, early is we have 2 things going on in this year that we don't normally have. Trump, an ex-president who tried to overturn the election on January 6th, the leader of one of the 2 parties. It sort of changes the dynamic of, let's have a referendum on the incumbent party because we're grumpy about gas prices. It's just a little different. Maybe it's not different for 95% of the voters, but it could be different for 5% or 3%. And then when Roe came down, I think I was one of those who thought it really would be a big deal.
Yeah.
And it has been a big deal. And there's just now a ton of data on that. Could the blue undertow be cresting after the red wave crested and will subside, go back down to a sort of somewhere in between? Absolutely possible. I'm totally agnostic on whether the blue undertow continues to rise, if undertows can rise or whatever. It yields. We're sort of in a state. It nets out to about where it is. I think that's all possible. But there's no denying that we're in a very different position and than we were 2 or 3 months ago, and an unusually different position in the sense that the momentum's been for the incumbent party. It's usually the other way, A. And B, I don't quite see going forward why the blue mini wave, or not more than mini wave, counter wave should subside. That is, Roe's not going away. These issues of state legislatures trying to grapple with what their laws should be. It's just still the fact that if you're voting in Michigan or Wisconsin, who the next governor is really does matter to what the abortion law is. I mean, so I don't think that fact changes. Now, if there's like a huge, economic crisis, of course, that fact can be less important than other facts, or if gas prices go shooting back up or something. But the fundamental facts for me, which are Trump and Roe, which at this point are threatened to trump the, gas prices, normal dissatisfaction with incumbent, which are the fundamental facts on the other side. I think those facts are as likely to stay there and conceivably even more noticeable than is to go away. So I'm sort of a believer in the blue undertow, if that's the right term, but doesn't mean it's inevitably continues or it doesn't end up somewhere in between.
Now, Emily mentioned Pennsylvania. I mean, President Biden visited there like 3 times in 1 week. I mean, it just shows how unbelievably crucial he believes that state is. But, and I'm sure you've talked about this in previous episodes as well, but the fact that Mitch McConnell said, 3 weeks ago, that he believes that the candidate quality in Senate races actually matters, therefore he finds it unlikely that the Republicans are going to take back the Senate, I thought was pretty revealing as well.
But of course, even that was such a wonderful, just one tiny interjection. I mean, such a wonderful case of the way now when the Republican side feels they have to talk. Why did they have candidates of that quality? Is that just a mysterious, flukish thing that happened because voters went crazy in a bunch of different states? I think there's one human being who's mostly responsible for that fact, whose name McConnell can't mention.
I mean, it's so true. Who are the real poster children for the "are you kidding me" school of candidates? For Herschel Walker and Mastriano and Dr. Oz, even if sometimes he kicked his former
All the
pets to
Arizona
the curb.
candidates.
Yeah, right, and even lower ballot.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bill and Natasha are making the key points that Trump and Dobbs have made this a referendum on the Republican Party and the Republican agenda in a way that's really unusual in a midterm election, right? It's like harder to have it all be about throwing the bums out when the out party is actually like very front and center and getting a huge thing done, i.e. ending abortion in many states. At the same time, one thing that I feel unresolved about, and I wonder what your thoughts on this are, but usually you see the polls tighten in the last 10 days before a midterm election. So when you look at the Senate numbers, you could still end up with the Democrats like in control or maybe barely in control of the Senate. But when I look at the House polls, given polarization and gerrymandering and how people have sorted and where they live in America, it still seems like the House switching over to Republican control seems fairly likely.